Welcome back. We are Outside the Box, a clinical podcast where we are driving our performance in and around the city of Sugar Land. Today we have a returning guest. I'm glad to have Ashley back.
Hi.
Last time we got to talk a lot about specific stress, cumulative stress, but today we're gonna shift gears and talk about stress in a different way, different perspective. This is gonna be the stuff that tends to get a lot of the attention. This is the traumatic events. This is the isolated items or the collection of isolated items that cause us the stress. So that's going to be today. But before we do, give us a quick reminder about you. Ashley, where are you coming from here?
My name is Ashley Stakes. I'm a licensed professional counselor associate. The associate part means that I'm in my first couple of years of counseling. So I have a supervisor. Her name is Cindy Doyle, who's also a specializer, or she specializes in first responders. I work at Carrera Counseling Services. That's up in the Woodlands. Mm-hmm. And we all specialize in first responders there. We're trying to do things like this, just get our name out in the community and let people know that we're a resource. And yes, I'll mention my background again. I'm not only a licensed professional counselor, I'm also a licensed paramedic. That was my first career, spent a little over 5 years doing that. Still technically licensed, not active, just counseling now. So.
Nice. Well, let's talk about some of these things that I think are, again, going to be a little uncomfortably relatable, but that's why we're talking about it. Let's identify some things, let's make some plans on things, and let's keep ourselves healthy and have a nice long career.
Absolutely.
Right? So today we're talking about traumatic stress. We're talking about the acute setting. Mm-hmm. Why don't you launch us into what really is traumatic stress then?
Last podcast recording, we talked about the cumulative stress, and we made the point of no injury has happened. Like that is just the job.
You showed up to work.
Yes.
You spent the day. Okay.
Yeah, you're here. You're wearing a badge. Yes, that was all of last episode. This one is what happens when injury happens. So of course I've got to start with definitions. Mm-hmm. How do we define what is traumatic and what is this word that we keep hearing and PTSD and all of that? And the best way that I can describe traumatic stress, it's kind of like how we would define an MCI as first responders. Mm. Anything that overwhelms our resources.
Okay.
Traumatic stress is the same thing. Because if we try and run around and define it, much like an MCI, if we try and run around and define it, there may be a few things that I think we could all agree, oof, that's going to be an MCI. Something like a plane crash, a bus crash. But then there are these little things that it kind of depends on the service, depends on the area, depends on the person. Mm-hmm. So there was a point at which we tried as a counseling profession, we tried to say like, hey, it's life-threatening things. So only if your life is threatened. But then what about things like sexual assault? Mm-hmm. Your life may not technically be threatened, but here we can still find that as a traumatic experience. So there are some things that are very clearly and objectively defined, but overall, traumatic stress is any experience that was horrific, sticks with you in some form or another with flashbacks, or you keep having intrusions of thoughts or memories, something that has completely overwhelmed your ability to process it like any other moment of the day that you would encounter.
Yeah. And that kind of takes us to this thing that this is why it might be traumatic for me, but you next to me in the same experience is not traumatic for you.
Absolutely.
Right? That it's not the event that we really classify. I guess we classify it as traumatic, right? Like that event was traumatic to each of us, but really the issue is that processing, that we've exceeded capacity to process. So very individual thing. You're talking about this, not like you don't choose this. You're not like, I'm going to have struggle with that one today. So that's what I choose. But to tie it back to the MCI example, you're right. There's so many different circumstances that even here in our own agency, depending on the time of day, whenever it is, do we have the resources available? Are they at the hospital already with people that who's available at 3 a.m. to handle a situation isn't the same as 3 p.m. So I guess it's not only is it individual between us, but it's kind of circumstantial there also with me, right? Like am fresh, I'm ready to go, I'm perky coming into work, having an event, maybe I have more capacity than the end of this 48-hour tour, and it's been a rough one, and the cumulative stress that we talked about has grown, and we're kind of primed to, I wouldn't say primed for it, but we're already wearing thin on our capabilities to process, right?
Yeah, another way to think of it, and it's a metaphor I use a lot, our cup is full. Our cup was already full, so therefore I have all the resources in the world that I need to get through this, but what's going on at home? Is home really stressful?
Yeah.
And you might have gotten a great night's sleep, and you may be doing these great things, but is your cup being emptied? Are you stepping into shift? And then potentially, bad call, bad experience with an empty cup. And that kind of, putting it in that sort of context.
Yeah.
How full was your cup when this happened?
So we talk about this event, capacity to process, it's overwhelmed. What's the difference between that moment in time and I have PTSD?
It's time.
Okay.
So right after an event happens, and maybe to make things easier, we'll use like something that would be like a plane crash. Lots of resources, lots of awfulness. Immediately after, so 3 days to a month, someone starts experiencing symptoms. Nightmares, intrusive thoughts, avoidance of work, maybe canceling a flight because, gosh, can't go there, can't even think about that right now. This would be considered acute stress disorder. It was immediately after an event. Of course, it's kind of normal to feel a little off right after something that big happens. The thing about acute stress is it's short-lived. It must not automatically, but within a reasonable amount of effort, a reasonable amount of time, it resolves itself. You are okay after about a month. No issue. PTSD is after that month mark, we're still seeing everything getting worse.
Okay.
All of these flashbacks, intrusive thoughts, hypervigilance. There's several different areas of criteria for PTSD, and you must hit however many signs and symptoms in each category. But it's when we start losing the ability to function. It seems like it is a really big, severe interference with our life to some degree. And now we're stepping in beyond that 1 month mark. These are persistent. It's also worth noting, PTSD can show up to 6 months after an event. So you can be quote unquote okay for 6 months. Suddenly something triggers it, something happens. It just kicks in and here we are.
Sounds fun.
Oh, it's the best.
All right, so the acute time frame, the body may or may not process through this. So while it's unpleasant to have these experiences, you're saying this is a normal thing. That let's normalize the first part. We have this experience and it's perfectly fine to not like this. Like just because we're in this job and we do these things doesn't mean that we like everything.
And then there's a certain point at which it probably should bother you. It should bother you to see some of these things. Maybe not all of them. I think every medic has, this call hits me, but this one just doesn't. That's normal. And that's a reason why after something like, if there were to, God forbid, be a plane crash here in Houston, we would have a really big debriefing. We would have a really big diffusing. That's why these are put in place, because it is normal to need help processing something that big.
Yeah.
And acute stress, if we're still in that, the normal, it's always okay not to be okay, but we're still here being normal in this struggle. That's that. Maybe the diffusing is what helps. Talking with a friend, a couple of weeks, and we're good. And we can put this to bed and we can let it rest. Yeah. That's just that. And awesome. Wonderful.
Yeah.
The lingering is where we get stuck.
Oh, yeah. Let's take the word stuck. So that's like the word that comes, like you're just stuck. And that's what it is. Like you're just kind of stuck in a loop. The processing is in a loop. And instead of coming out of the loop and being done, like that's where that term is, right?
Absolutely.
Is there more to that?
No, I mean, you hit the nail on the head that yes, we can get stuck. Sometimes figuring out why it is we're stuck.
Mm-hmm.
The why, and then how do we move through it? How do I get unstuck?
Mm-hmm.
That in and of itself is where people get stuck.
Yeah.
That is when counseling steps in.
Got it. And okay. So, man, I would like to say that a group of us goes and has this experience. Some find it traumatic and are having trouble with it and processing through, and some really not. Your desensitization of it, right? Like people who've been around 20, 30 years can more rapidly handle this. It's not the first exposure, but yet you have this young person who's having trouble. I would be hesitant to kind of puff your chest out and wear a badge of honor if that didn't bother me, but it bothered you. So that, would you put some emphasis on this whole group had this same, not the same experience. This whole group is in the situation. Some are experiencing it differently. And the impact of those that didn't have a struggle processing it can have on those that are. That we get the crew, we get the old salt, and it's the difference between if you can't handle this job, get out. And yeah, that sucked, man. It really did. You're not wrong. That was terrible. What you see the difference there? Is there as much of an impact as I want to make it seem like there is?
That peer-to-peer can have the impact. Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes we maybe go to a younger medic because we've seen worse and we're saying like, hey, yeah, it's not that big a deal. In a way, we're trying to give them perspective. We're trying to help them see like, you're going to be okay. That might be our attempt at trying to ease their experience and ease their pain. But unfortunately, it comes across as invalidating. It comes across as, ugh, and what the hell's wrong with me that I can't get through this if this is no big deal? The other side of this is there's just no denying that some of us, it's not the job for us. That certainly if you're falling apart after every single call and you're just not able to process it at any point, that may be a sign that this isn't the career for you. But there's nothing wrong with having an objectively traumatic call, of having a call that just hit a nerve and saying, I'm not handling this well. I need help. That's really not the time to shame that person. It's the time to lean in and say, well, what do you need? Because if we look at it from, this is hitting me because my resources were low, what resources do they need?
Yeah.
And I think that's what admin tries to answer that question. Do we need more training? Like, did you feel ill-equipped for this? Do you need some time off? Are things going wrong at home? There's so many different answers to that question. What do you need? Like, how can we help? How do we need to fill your cup?
Yeah.
That's a much better approach. And that's real support, I suppose.
Yeah. I think it goes back to your comment of like, okay to not be okay. That when somebody else also, like, I'm not feeling okay and now I'm having my own trouble and self-doubt, but somebody else, especially somebody that I look up to, somebody that is more of a mentor figure, senior around here, comes around, says, it's okay to not be okay. That was a crappy experience. And then lead into the, what do you need? I mean, man, like what a potent opportunity to just validate this person as having a normal human experience.
And the flip side of it is, all of us, we have a responsibility to try and help, to try and get better, to acknowledge that something went wrong and now I've got to heal from it. It's not your fault that trauma happened. It's not your fault that you experienced this. That really sucks. It does. But it is your responsibility to figure out what you need to do about it. How do we move past it? How do we not sit in this and just let it fester?
I would agree 100%. Because we came into this field, we want to do this job. And not only do we encounter more traumatic experiences than general public because we're invited into them. We're like, hey, here's the phone number. Call me when something bad happens.
That's the job. Yes.
So if we're going to come into the job and say, I want you to invite me into your bad experiences and then not have the means to take care of ourselves in the bad, like we're really setting ourselves up for trouble.
Yeah.
which we have been for decades. And here we are, why we're,
Yes.
trying to make the push. So we had talked about the acute stress. We put the time frames to it, makes it a PTSD kind of situation. But there's an important little inject to make that there's a such thing as moral injury.
Yeah.
And this is not what we're talking about, though. But we might get some mimicking behaviors. It might start getting a little murky for us. Help us understand what a moral injury is, and let's compare it to this traumatic event.
Absolutely. It lives in the injury category. And I see it misdiagnosed quite a bit. Moral injury can also present with some of this feeling of it's a call that I keep replaying. It's something that I can't move past. And sometimes it's called PTSD when it really isn't. Technically, not quite.
Mm-hmm.
Still an injury, still something worth talking about. So anyone who has not heard the term moral injury before, the VA coined it. They were able to get very clear about their definition.
Mm-hmm.
To be completely honest, the definition for EMS is still growing and evolving. There's still a piece of this that personally I think a lot more research needs to be done. And I mean, I could be looking at a PhD if I were to move into this. So yeah.
You're first.
Right. So moral injury, the best definition that I can give, it's a moment when you have been ordered to act or not act in a way that violates your own personal moral code.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something like, I guess the best way I can describe it is just give an example.
Sure.
Personally, I've experienced this, and I didn't realize what it was until talking to my supervisor. It was a call in the middle of the night. A woman witnessed a fight. So there's no injury. She's fine. But one of those, we got to calm her down. And in the course of this call, a pediatric arrest drops literally down the street. My crew, we could have walked to it. And I'm listening to the tones drop, and they ended up having to tone 2 trucks away. We were at the edge of our district. And of course, that's going to be 15, 20-minute response time, even in the middle of the night, even lights and sirens. And I lose it. Because in my mind, here I am talking to someone who's not a patient, who is fine.
Mm-hmm.
A child is dead. I'm walking distance from it. And I can't leave her. I can't leave this scene because that's abandonment.
Yeah.
And regardless of how inappropriate my behavior was on that call, we ended up transporting the woman, and I absolutely got my hand slapped for yelling some unfortunate things. But, and we got to the hospital, delivered her to the hospital, found out that the kiddo passed.
Yeah.
Did not get CPR in time.
Mm-hmm.
And that call stuck with me for so long. It haunted me, is how I remember describing it. And it was a difficult call to place in my mind because why am I struggling with this? Nothing happened.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing happened. And that can be moral injury.
Okay.
I was not able to be a paramedic. I was not able to do what it is that I felt I needed and wanted to do. I was kind of constricted in one way or another.
It sounds like a really difficult decision point.
Yes.
I guess is the whole crux of this.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, man. So I guess the reason we talk about it is just like you said, we're talking about traumatic events.
Mm-hmm.
And here's this thing that can produce feeling kind of a way.
Mm-hmm.
But there's where you said, where's the event? And here's the increased me personally, here's the increased anxiety because it doesn't make sense. I don't get it.
Absolutely.
Right? Like here, right, this lady, not traumatic, but here are her faces in my dreams. Why is she always here all the time? I want her to go away.
And it's moral injury is so damaging because at minimum it punctures self-worth. It really shakes that. And depending on what the incident was, because maybe it was having a supervisor that didn't allow you to RSI someone that you knew needed to be RSI'd, and therefore they died. And now, well, you're the medic that killed that guy. And it can be now I feel outside of my profession. Now I feel I violated these unspoken vows or these unspoken rules of what it means to be a healer and a helper, I am now outside of that. And that's the part that's difficult to wrestle with.
Yeah.
First identify and then wrestle with that.
Well, let's talk about this wrestling match.
Yeah.
That one way or another, more broadly, we get these symptoms of like that hypervigilance, can't sleep, or do sleep and keep having these same kind of experiences in the night. I was a terrible night walker. It's like part of mine. Like I like living this out in sleep. Any of those variety of things, or stuck thinking about this event, whether it seems traumatic or not, I personally am not going to sort out, this is my acute stress reaction and this is my moral injury, right? Like that's just, let's be reasonable. I have a bundle of symptoms. I'm like, I don't know what this is and I got to do something about it. What do I do about it?
You bring it to a counselor.
There you go.
Yeah, you bring it to a counselor and you hope that they can help you sort it out. That is the kicker. And that's, again, starting to become another one of my passions, is educating other counselors about these these splitting hairs, these intricacies. Because like I said, they all can look the same. We got to have a good eye to sort through all of that, and someone who knows what first responders are going through.
Yeah.
And a big part of healing from moral injury specifically, on the counseling side, I got to help you sort through, what is guilt? What is yours to own? What's the mistake that you might have made? How do we grow from that? That's what guilt is. It's actually a more productive emotion than we like to think, if we use it the right way.
Okay.
If we use it the wrong way, it starts looking a lot more like shame. Ooh, this must be who I am and what I am, and this is inherently an issue with me. And shame tells you, get away from everyone. But yes, you are that bad medic. You did do bad. Don't even tell anyone about this. So that's from a counseling side. And the other essential part of it is we need peer-to-peer support. So a lot of EMS agencies, fire departments, they're creating peer support groups. And I am trying to get the word out to as many of them as I can that moral injury is a big one. You need a peer to let you back into the light, to say, hey, this has happened to me too, or that was outside your control. I still accept you. You are my peer. You're my brother. You're still in this with me. We got to be let back in, and we have to sort through all of these emotions, because we got to believe that we deserve to be let back in, that we're not this terrible, awful person. I can step into the light.
Yeah. So some normalization.
Absolutely.
And validation with it.
Yeah.
So again, here's the power of, here's this crew. You have these people around. You make a big difference of it. And you had made, I even put in my notes because I liked it how you said it before, like you have to feel the feelings, right?
Yeah. Bad news.
Yeah.
Bad news, everyone. You have to feel your feelings.
Let's just acknowledge that one. It's gonna suck.
It's the worst. Yes.
You know, if this was a crappy experience that you had not yet processed, it's because you haven't had the full crappy experience. So you gotta have the rest of the crappy experience. Super cool.
And it's worth noting, if you're experiencing PTSD and it's at a level that just feels abnormal, feels beyond, feels really big, it's because it may be, and it's also because it may be tied to past trauma. What did your childhood look like?
So let's jump into the counseling part. That when we had talked about the cumulative stress before, that counseling session, that visit might look a little bit different than, hey, I had this experience that I just can't get over. What does this one look like?
This one looks like starting really slow, building up, building a really good rapport, really trusting the person whom you're working with, this counselor, because we've got to look at, how did this traumatic experience that occurred however many weeks ago, however many months ago, what is it that we're feeling from this? Have you felt this way before? Well, what was that? How old were you? What happened? Oh, like this is way bigger than just this moment. So, it makes sense why we're not processing this, because we have 8 of these to process. that go back all the way in through childhood.
Yeah.
And it looks like there's a modality that I use. It's called EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Some people are very scared of it.
Let's be real. It sounds hokey as hell.
It does.
It
yes.
really does.
No, I hear that. Yeah, I accept that.
I sounded really hokey. I became a, like, out of desperation participant. What else is there? Nothing else is working with stuff. So for hokey, yes, hokey as it seems, it incredibly effective for me. Also, like, best and worst experience ever, like at the same time. Well, not at the same time. As an experience, best and worst. So
yeah, EMDR, highly evidence-based, highly researched. It came about in around the 80s. Specifically, it was a technique to be able to get soldiers who were in active combat, to get them at an okay enough place to get back out there. And at the time, it was just EMD. It was just, let's just desensitize you. But now we have the reprocessing part. And the simplest, I could spend a whole other episode talking about the intricacies of it and all of it. But the simplest way to think about it is that it is a technique where we mimic rapid eye movement. So there's some kind of, I use buzzers in my office, just these little like paddles that you hold in your hand, and one buzzes in your right hand, one in the left, and they switch. It makes the brain switch hemispheres. We also have a little light bar. You follow the light, but people feel like that's close to hypnosis. We stimulate this REM sleep in order to store a traumatic memory appropriately and properly. That's part of the theory. A traumatic event happens, the brain doesn't know what to do with it. It's like a sticky note that gets stuck on your desk, and now you stumble across it all the time, and you can't figure out how to put it in the drawer and to put it in that long-term storage, that long-term memory that it needs to be in. And EMDR is an accelerated way to do this. Because again, we have to talk about the things. We have to feel the feelings. EMDR allows you to do that within your own mind and in a safe place with a counselor facilitating and helping you through that.
And it's exhausting.
It is, yes.
Oh my God.
Yeah, your brain's doing a lot of work. So I always tell people, be gentle with yourself after doing an EMDR session, because it may just be an hour that you're doing it. But, oof, your brain has done so much rewiring. Take a nap.
Yes. I think the first time I slept for a good, 16 hours.
Yeah.
All right. Well, excellent. Ashley, this is, man. Any other thoughts that we haven't mentioned? Any other comments you want to throw in here? Even throwing back to cumulative stress. Does cumulative stress prime us to be in this spot with acute stress? All one big bundle of wax?
It absolutely can, because we got to go back to the beginning. Traumatic stress means this event overwhelmed my resources. Where are you at the cumulative stress stages? Where are you in burnout? Are you there? Are you stuck in it? Does it feel overwhelming? Are you at the point of cumulative stress and burnout where we've got suicidal ideation, where we're already using alcohol and drugs and feeling as though we're at the end of our rope? No wonder this call landed really hard on you. No wonder you're having troubles processing this and putting this in the right storage container in your brain. Yeah, absolutely.
Got to take care of ourselves.
Yes.
Ashley, thank you again for being back with us, sharing some more thoughts, some more knowledge on this. Just really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It has been really great to get this information out, to talk about it.
Well, good. I'm glad we could help. So thanks for tuning in, and we will catch you for the next one.